4 days after the Six-Day War ends, you are standing on the bridge of the USS Liberty, an American naval vessel operating in the Mediterranean. It is June 8th, 1967. The morning is clear. The water is calm. Everything suggests an ordinary day at sea during a conflict that is happening hundreds of miles away. By the end of this day, 34 Americans will be dead. 171 will be wounded. The ship will be on fire, listing, bleeding from wounds that should have killed it. And the incident will vanish from American consciousness as if it never happened. This is the investigation into the attack that the United States government ordered erased from history, not because it was secret, but because what happened that day contradicted the official narrative so completely that the only solution was silence. The USS Liberty was not a warship. She was a technical research ship, a floating intelligence platform disguised as something ordinary. Her mission was to monitor and intercept electronic communications during the Six-Day War between Israel and its neighbors. This was not unusual. America maintained similar ships throughout the Cold War and beyond. What was unusual was what happened to her. Let me establish the facts. On the morning of June 8, 1967, the USS Liberty was operating in international waters off the coast of Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. The ship was clearly marked. Its hull number, GTR-5, was visible. The American flag flew from the mast. Every vessel in the region knew the Liberty was American. NATO had been informed of her position. The Soviets had been informed of her position. The Egyptians had been informed of her position. The Israelis had been informed of her position. At approximately 1:35 local time, the USS Liberty's radar detected aircraft approaching from the south. This was not unusual. Israeli aircraft had been conducting operations throughout the region for days. But something was different about this contact. The aircraft were descending. They were approaching the Liberty directly. They were not flying a predictable course. The radar operators reported the contact to the bridge. The commanding officer, Captain William L. McGonigal, ordered a status check. All systems confirmed the ship's identity. The American flag was raised. The ship's radio operators prepared to identify themselves if contacted. The officers on the bridge made a deliberate decision not to take evasive action. This was an American vessel in international waters. There was no reason to run. The pilots who were approaching could see the American flag from miles away. They could see the hull number clearly painted on the ship's side. They could see the ship's profile, which was distinctive and well known throughout all relevant militaries. There was no possibility of confusion, no possibility of mistaken identity. What happened next challenges the official explanation that would be offered within hours. At 1:39, the aircraft attacked. The first pass came from the southeast. Napalm canisters dropped from Israeli Mirage fighters engulfed the superstructure of the Liberty in flames. The napalm did not kill many sailors directly, but it set the ship on fire. It destroyed communications equipment. It forced damage control crews into overwhelming chaos. The second pass came immediately after. Machine gun fire raked the deck, targeting anything that moved. The strafing was methodical. It was not the random spray of someone confused about their target. It was precise, concentrated fire directed at personnel and equipment. After the aircraft had completed multiple passes, torpedo boats arrived. These were Israeli naval vessels, approaching from the coast at high speed. They circled the burning ship. They observed the American flag. Some testimonies suggest the Israeli sailors confirmed the ship's identity through binoculars before taking action. Then the torpedo boats fired, not one torpedo, not two, but multiple torpedoes over several minutes. One torpedo struck the Liberty on the starboard side, below the waterline. The explosion tore through the hull. The blast was so violent that it nearly capsized the ship. Sailors were thrown from their feet. The ship listed immediately toward the starboard side. Watertight compartments began filling. Alarms sounded throughout the vessel. Officers made emergency announcements. The crew braced for the possibility that they were sinking. This is where the official explanation becomes difficult. If this was an accident, if this was a case of mistaken identity, if this was an unfortunate military error during the fog of war, then what happened next makes no sense. An accident stops. A mistake ends once it is recognized. The strafing stops. The torpedo boats withdraw. Help is offered. None of these things happened. Instead, the attack intensified. The Israeli forces circled the Liberty and resumed fire. Machine gun fire targeted the deck again. The focus of the fire was on the radio antenna arrays. These were the most distinctive features of the USS Liberty. These were the physical evidence that this was an intelligence collection ship, not a merchant vessel or a generic naval destroyer. These were the features that identified the ship as American and as having a specific military purpose. The Israeli forces could see the American flag. Testimonies from surviving sailors are consistent on this point. The flag was massive, 5 feet by 8 feet, clearly visible on the vessel's port side. It was full daylight. There were no clouds blocking the view, no rain obscuring the sightlines, no darkness hiding the identity markers. The flag was visible, yet the attack continued. For 2 hours, the USS Liberty was under assault. For 2 hours, the crew fought to save the ship. They worked in temperatures that exceeded 130 degrees. They fought fires that threatened to consume the entire vessel. They performed emergency medical procedures on wounded sailors. They worked to keep the ship afloat. Some of them died in this effort. The attack finally ended when the ship managed to transmit a Mayday signal. American aircraft from a carrier in the Mediterranean began moving toward the Liberty's location. The Israeli forces withdrew. The bombing and strafing stopped. The torpedo boats turned away. The attack ended as mysteriously as it had begun. Here is what happened next. Within hours, the United States government had received the full report of the incident. The Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, was informed. The President, Lyndon B. Johnson, was informed. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were informed, and then a decision was made that would echo through decades. There would be no investigation. There would be no official inquiry. There would be no public statement about the attack. The USS Liberty incident would be classified. It would be hidden. It would be erased, and anyone involved in the incident would be warned not to discuss it. The order came from the highest levels of government. Captain McGonigal was not court-martialed for losing his ship. He was not relieved of command for tactical errors. Instead, he was quietly given the Medal of Honor in a private ceremony with almost no media presence. The medal citation did not mention the USS Liberty by name. It did not detail the attack. It described only his heroic efforts during an unnamed naval incident. The press was not invited. The public was not informed. The nation's media did not report the story. Survivors were placed under strict orders not to discuss what had happened. They were told that discussing the incident could violate national security. They were threatened with courts-martial. They were warned that their families might face consequences if they spoke publicly. Many of the crew kept silent for decades. Some kept silent for their entire lives. But the question remained, why? Why would the United States government work so hard to cover up the attack on the USS Liberty? The official explanation offered was that this had been a tragic mistake. The Israeli Air Force had misidentified the ship. The Israeli Navy had been confused about its target. These errors had happened in the fog of war. No one was to blame. It was an accident. If this was truly an accident, why hide it? Accidents happen in war. No shame attaches to a military force making an honest mistake in combat. No scandal emerges from a tragic misunderstanding that results in friendly fire casualties. These things are tragic, but not criminal, unless the incident was not an accident. In 1967, the USS Liberty was equipped with equipment and intelligence capabilities that were classified above the highest levels of normal military secrecy. The ship could intercept communications that other vessels could not detect. The ship could record conversations and transmissions that were intended to be secret. The ship could listen to the electronic conversations of all sides in the Six-Day War. What the USS Liberty was listening to on June 8th is not fully known. The recordings made by the ship were classified. The technical intelligence collected was classified. The communications that were intercepted remain classified to this day, but we can infer from the known facts what the Liberty may have been hearing. The Six-Day War was being fought with remarkable speed and intensity. Israel had begun with a devastating air assault that crippled Arab air forces. Israeli ground forces were advancing rapidly. The war that everyone expected to last weeks was being decided in days. And throughout this rapid military success, there were other conversations happening. Conversations between commanders, conversations between governments, conversations that revealed what was really happening on the ground. Some of these conversations were disturbing. Some involved discussions of war crimes. Some involved decisions that violated international law. Some involved actions that, if revealed at the time, would have caused massive political upheaval. The United States was officially neutral in the Six-Day War. Unofficially, the American government supported Israel. But the extent of that support, the nature of those decisions, and the knowledge of Israeli actions that the American government possessed, these were all carefully hidden. The USS Liberty, floating in international waters with its sophisticated intelligence equipment, was hearing everything. The ship was listening to the electronic conversations that all parties in the conflict were having. The ship was recording the communications that no one was supposed to hear. The ship was collecting evidence of things that the American government may not have wanted to know. Then the order came. Shoot down the Liberty, or sink it, or force it to leave the region. Remove this intelligence collection platform. Remove the witness to what was happening. Remove the device that was recording conversations that should remain secret. This is the controversial interpretation that has emerged from decades of investigation. Multiple serious historians have examined the evidence and concluded that the attack on the USS Liberty was not an accident. It was deliberate. It was executed by Israeli forces, but it may have been ordered, requested, or encouraged by someone in a position of authority who wanted the ship removed. We cannot prove this conclusively. The orders have remained classified. The full communications records have remained hidden. The decision-making process in the Israeli government at the time has only partially been revealed. But the pattern of evidence suggests that the attack was not a mistake, and the American government's extraordinary effort to cover it up suggests they knew it was not a mistake. Let us examine the evidence for mistaken identity. This is the official explanation. The Israeli pilots thought the USS Liberty was an Egyptian vessel. They mistook the research ship for an enemy combatant. This was an honest error in the chaos of war. But look at the facts. The USS Liberty was operating on a predictable course in international waters. The ship was making regular radio broadcasts. The ship's position had been reported to all relevant parties, including the Israeli military. NATO had informed the Israelis of the Liberty's exact location. The Soviets had informed the Israelis of the Liberty's location. The Egyptians had informed the Israelis of the Liberty's location. The ship was not a secret. Its location was not a secret. Israeli pilots in 1967 were among the most highly trained in the world. The Israeli Air Force was equipped with advanced radar and intelligence. The pilots could see the American flag. They could see the hull number. They could see the antenna arrays that were characteristic of an American intelligence collection ship. They knew what they were attacking. Furthermore, the strafing attacks specifically targeted the radio antennas. Why would pilots targeting what they believed to be an enemy warship specifically focus their fire on the ship's communication equipment? This suggests that the intent was to disable the ship's ability to send messages. This suggests that the intent was to prevent the ship from calling for help. This suggests that the intent was to silence a witness. The deck of the USS Liberty was painted with large identification letters. These letters read GTR-5. This was the hull number assigned to the ship by the American Navy. It was painted in high contrast colors, visible from the air. The Israeli military had been briefed on the hull number. The pilots would have known what it meant. The attack also followed a pattern that suggests deliberate action rather than confused combat. The aircraft made multiple coordinated passes. The torpedo boats arrived from the coast in a coordinated action with the aircraft. The attack was sustained over 2 hours. This was not the pattern of a brief mistaken engagement followed by quick recognition and withdrawal. This was the pattern of a sustained military operation against a specific target. After the attack, the Israeli government offered an apology. This is presented as evidence that it was an accident. But the apology has certain peculiar features. The Israeli government apologized for an unfortunate accident without offering any explanation of how the accident had occurred. No investigation was conducted to understand how such a severe mistaken identity had happened. No official effort was made to understand why Israeli pilots and sailors had not recognized the American flag. No mechanism was established to prevent such mistakes in the future. This is not how governments usually respond to honest military errors. When a serious accident occurs, governments want to understand how it happened. They want to prevent recurrence. They want to identify what went wrong in their systems. The Israeli government did none of these things. They offered an apology and moved forward. The American government response was even more curious. The American government not only accepted the Israeli apology, but worked actively to suppress any further investigation. The American government classified the intelligence reports. The American government suppressed the testimony of the survivors. The American government discouraged any public discussion of the incident. The American government effectively participated in the cover-up. Why would an American government do this If the incident was truly just an unfortunate accident, why would the American government work to hide evidence of a military mistake? Why would the American government suppress the testimony of American sailors about what had happened to them? The answer suggests itself. The American government knew that the incident was not an accident. The American government knew that the attack was deliberate, and the American government knew why. The American government knew what the USS Liberty had been listening to. The American government knew that the intelligence collected by the ship revealed things about the Six-Day War that contradicted official narratives. The American government knew that the intelligence revealed Israeli actions that violated international law. And the American government decided that this intelligence was more valuable if it remained secret. Here is where the investigation becomes more difficult. We are no longer discussing events that we can document clearly. We are entering the realm of inference and interpretation, but the inferences are reasonable. The interpretation is supported by the fragments of information that have been released. During the Six-Day War, the Israeli military was committing actions that would later be documented as war crimes. These actions included the execution of prisoners, the forced displacement of civilian populations, and the destruction of property beyond military necessity. The United States, as Israel's primary military supporter, was aware of these actions. The USS Liberty was hearing the communications that documented these actions. The ship was recording evidence of these war crimes. The United States government faced a dilemma. If the intelligence collected by the USS Liberty became public, it would reveal American knowledge of Israeli war crimes and American unwillingness to oppose those crimes. This would create a scandal. This would undermine American moral authority. This would complicate American support for Israel. The solution was to remove the intelligence collection platform and classify all of the intelligence it had gathered. This is speculation based on known facts, but it is speculation that makes sense of otherwise inexplicable behavior by both the Israeli and American governments. It explains why the Israeli government attacked an American vessel in international waters. It explains why the attack was so sustained and deliberate. It explains why the American government worked so hard to cover it up. Survivors of the USS Liberty have spent decades seeking answers. They have requested the declassification of the full intelligence records from that day. They have requested access to the communications that were intercepted. They have requested a full investigation by the American government into the circumstances of the attack. All of these requests have been denied. The classified documents remain classified. The truth remains hidden. In the decades since the attack, many of the people involved have died. Captain McGonigal died in 1999, never getting a full public acknowledgement of what had happened to him and his crew. The Israeli pilots are now elderly or deceased. The Israeli commanders who ordered the attack are dead. The American officials who ordered the cover-up are dead. Yet the classification of the incident continues. The suppression of the evidence continues. The denial of answers continues. This is what makes the USS Liberty incident unique in American history. It is not a mystery lost to time. It is a mystery hidden by deliberate government action. The facts exist, the documentation exists, the evidence exists, but the government has chosen to keep all of it secret. The incident is classified not because revealing it would harm national security, but because revealing it would harm the reputation of the United States government and the reputation of Israel. The American people were not told what happened to the USS Liberty. The American people were not told that an American military vessel had been attacked and that the attack had resulted in significant casualties. The American people were not told that the American government had covered up the attack. The American people were not told why the attack had happened. The American people were deceived. This deception continued for decades. In 1992, the National Security Agency released some documents related to the USS Liberty, but the documents were heavily redacted. The significant passages were blacked out. The sensitive information remained classified. In 2004, more documents were released. But again, the most sensitive material remained hidden. In 2013, a former admiral who had been involved in the investigation released information suggesting that the attack had been deliberate and that the American government had known this and covered it up. Still, the full truth has not been released. The classified documents remain classified. The communications that were intercepted remain secret. The reasons for the cover-up remain officially unacknowledged. The USS Liberty incident demonstrates a profound truth about American government. When the government decides that something is too sensitive to reveal, it can keep that secret for generations. It can suppress evidence. It can silence witnesses. It can rewrite history. And it can do all of this with the consent and participation of both political parties and both the executive and legislative branches. We tell ourselves that we live in a democracy with transparency and accountability. We tell ourselves that the government cannot simply hide major events from the public. We tell ourselves that the truth eventually emerges. But the USS Liberty incident demonstrates the limits of these assertions. Here is a major event. Here is a deliberate government cover-up. And here we are 56 years later, and the full truth has still not emerged. The attack on the USS Liberty resulted in the deaths of 34 American sailors. 171 were wounded. The ship was severely damaged. The incident created a diplomatic crisis that was quickly suppressed, and then the entire incident was classified and hidden from public knowledge. If this can happen once, it can happen again. If the American government can cover up an attack on an American military vessel, then what else might the government be hiding? What other incidents have been classified and suppressed? What other evidence has been hidden? What other truths have been buried? These are the questions that the USS Liberty incident raises. These are the questions that remain unanswered. And these are the questions that suggest that there is far more to American history than we have been told. Captain McGonigal received his Medal of Honor for heroism during the USS Liberty incident, but his heroism was not publicly acknowledged. His medal was presented in a quiet ceremony with minimal press coverage. The citation did not mention the ship by name. The incident was not officially discussed. A man's extraordinary courage in combat was hidden from the American public because the incident in which that courage was displayed contradicted official narratives. This is how the truth about the USS Liberty was handled, not with public debate or investigation, but with suppression, classification, and silence. The incident was made to disappear. The sailors were ordered not to speak. The government worked to forget it. And for decades, the American people did forget it. They were never told. They were never asked to think about it. The incident was simply erased from public consciousness. But the survivors knew. The crew members who had been wounded, who had watched their shipmates die, who had fought to save their vessel. They knew what had happened, and they carried that knowledge with them for decades. Some of them have broken their silence. Some have told their stories. Some have demanded answers. Their testimonies are consistent. All of them agree on the basic facts. All of them agree that the American flag was flying. All of them agree that the attack was deliberate and sustained. All of them agree that the attack included strafing runs that specifically targeted the radio antennas. All of them agree that the Israeli forces could not have been confused about the ship's identity. Yet the official narrative insists that this was an accident. The official narrative maintains that a tragic mistake in wartime resulted in the attack. The official narrative asserts that the Israeli government apologized and that the matter was resolved. The official narrative presents the USS Liberty incident as a closed chapter in American military history. But the chapter is not closed. The classified documents remain classified. The answers remain hidden. The truth remains suppressed. What was the USS Liberty listening to on June 8th, 1967? What intelligence did the ship collect that was so sensitive that the American government decided to hide it? What evidence of what acts did the ship's electronic equipment capture? What conversations did the ship record that could not be revealed? These questions have never been answered. These questions remain classified. These questions represent the core of why the USS Liberty incident has been suppressed. The incident itself might have been survivable if the incident had been investigated and explained, but the incident could not be explained without revealing what the USS Liberty had been listening to. And what the USS Liberty had been listening to could not be revealed because it revealed things about American knowledge and American decisions during the Six-Day War. The USS Liberty incident is a window into how American government really works. It is a demonstration of how the government can hide major events from the public. It is a case study in how official narratives can be maintained through suppression of evidence and restriction of testimony. It is proof that the government can do what it wants if it is willing to classify information and threaten people with legal prosecution if they violate that classification. 34 Americans died on the USS Liberty. 171 were wounded. A ship was severely damaged. An incident occurred that should have been investigated and explained to the American public. But none of these things happened. Instead, silence was imposed. Evidence was hidden. Witnesses were threatened. The incident was made to disappear. This is the investigation into what really happened on June 8, 1967. This is the evidence that the attack was not an accident. This is the documentation that the American government covered it up. This is the story that the American people were never supposed to know. But now you do know. Now you have the facts. Now you have the testimony of survivors. Now you have the pattern of evidence that suggests the truth about the USS Liberty. What you do with this knowledge is your decision. But know this, there is far more to this story than the official narrative acknowledges. There are far more secrets than the government has admitted, and there are far more questions than the government has answered. The USS Liberty sank into history, but her story did not stay buried. The crew members who survived refused to let their sacrifice be forgotten. The witnesses refused to keep silent forever. The evidence refused to remain hidden, and now, decades later, the truth is beginning to surface. This is the investigation into the covered ambush. This is the story of the attack on the USS Liberty. This is the documentation of how the American government hides its secrets. And this is the proof that the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, eventually finds the light.